I feel like I hear this comment all the time. We have an ineffective board, and if we could just get some new board members, our board would be so much more effective in our organization, would raise more money, have more resources, and support the community that we serve much better. Hi, I'm Tom Brush, Advancement Design CEO, and here to tell you a little bit why sometimes that comment is not about the board members, but it's how we manage the board members and what are we doing as a staff to ensure that the board is prepared to do the role that they've been given or that they've assumed. One of the challenges is that many times it's not their fault. They don't know necessarily what to expect. So here are three key things that you can do to make sure that your board is as effective as it can possibly be. The first one is to make sure there are expectations. If you haven't clearly set aside what are the expectations for your board members, how are they supposed to know what their role is supposed to be? Have you told them how much are they supposed to give or consider giving, or do they have to get resources? Or maybe they have to go out and identify others who can support that. Do they need to sit on a committee? How much time is that committee going to take? How many meetings do they need to attend? All of these things are clear expectations that are critical for board members to know so they can make the right decision about whether or not this position is for them and it fits with their current work, lifestyle, and really the time that they have available and accessible. There are some really great board members or people who could be great board members, but they just don't have the time or the other resources or capacity to really do what is expected of a board member. But if we're not sharing that with them, how are they ever going to truly know what the expectations that they have on them? So setting clear expectations and making sure they have that up front is a critical piece of it. So that's one thing. The second thing is, how are we communicating with them? I was at an event today, and a board member actually stopped by, and he said, I didn't really know that we did these type of events. And I looked and talked with a colleague of mine, and I was like, well, how can they not really know? Don't they read our newsletter? Chances are that they maybe don't read our newsletter. Sometimes I think board members feel like they have all the inside information, and so they get those mass mailings we send out, or e-news, or postcards, or whatever, and they just don't assume that that's something they need to read because it's information they probably already have. Or maybe we haven't shared with them enough about what are the details about what's included in what we're sharing to our entire constituency base. Now, a good board member should read as much as they can. But again, remember, if they're a really good board member, they're very busy, they have other things going on, they're probably involved with other organizations. And so for them, managing the communications they get is an important part of what goes on in their daily life. So we have to be clear that we're sharing all the information we need to get to them in a manner in which they can gain it, manage it, and then be able to interact and remember where they're supposed to be and what they're supposed to do. Again, that comes back a little bit to the first point of expectations. Do we let them know that it's expected that they show up at a small social event or a educational event that we're doing? Do we tell them that's part of their responsibilities? And if not, are we wondering why they're not showing up? Maybe they just aren't interested in that part of the program and they want to really focus on one other thing. I can remember back a long time ago, we were running campaign events, and we would sometimes wonder, why are our major donors and sometimes our board members not in attendance if we weren't actively encouraging them to show up at these campaign events? And in reality, they had already had personal specialized attention. And so they might be thinking, well, this event's not really for me, and if I go, chances are we comp them. So that's just more expense I'm putting on the organization when I've already had in-depth knowledge and understanding of what's going on. Are we making it clear that we want them to be at those events and the benefit of having them there? So how we communicate is important. And in that regard, are we sending them information before board meetings so that they're able to be prepared and looking forward to what the conversation is going to be about, so that they're not just sitting there reading through the last minutes or reading through and trying to grasp whatever concept you're talking about in the moment, rather than having the opportunity to have time ahead of time and then be able to share it. So communication is another key thing. And we have to understand how each board member likes to be communicated with, because guaranteed they're not all going to receive information, want to get information, access it the same way that everybody else does. So understanding and identifying what that is an important piece of our communication process with our board members. So that's item number 2. And finally, number 3 is engage. One of the worst things we can do is put people on board, have them be really excited about being a board member, and then not engage them in what we're doing. Feeling like, well, they need some time to sort of get settled in, meet other board members, understand what we're doing, what's the process. If we're worried about that, we already have them behind the 8 ball. That should be part of the orientation. We engage them before they come to their first board meeting and understand what are some of the topics we've been talking about. Maybe share the minutes from the last 3 or 4 board meetings so they can kind of see, well, here are the topics that we've been talking about, or the board's been talking about, and I can come in more educated. And when we have our board meetings, how are we running them? Are we just regurgitating information, sharing reports, and they're just sitting there taking it all in? And yes, there's some value to that because they need to understand the programming that we're running. But is that really engaging them in the process? And is it making the best use of their time? I don't know how many times I've heard board members say, yeah, we went to a meeting and the staff all just gave reports. And that was interesting, but I could have got that in an email. You could have recorded it and sent it to me. There are other ways to get us that information without me having to leave whatever I'm doing, get there a little bit early, sit through a meeting, and then leave and go home and go back and figure out, well, what was my purpose for being there? I could have conference called that in and listened to what you had to say. So how are we using the time that we have together with board members to really get the best return on the investment of their time? How do we make board meetings, and maybe we have less of them, but we have them more engaged in the process? So here's a tip that you can use in a board meeting if you want. As a one way to engage them, if you can't think of anything else, put together a list of prospects. They could be corporate prospects, they could be foundation prospects, they could be individual prospects. And at every meeting, share a list of them with here are some prospects and ask them, do you know these people? Do you know somebody at this corporation because we're trying to get in for this reason? Do you know somebody at this foundation? Or maybe share, here's a list of the board of directors of foundations we're trying to get in. Do you have a relationship with any of those people? Here are some people who we think are donors that we think might have possibility to be more supportive of our efforts. Do you know any of them? Do you know anybody who might know them? Can you go back to your LinkedIn file and pull them up and see, are you connected through some other connection you have to somebody that we know? That is a way that we can engage them at meetings, and so they feel like they're active participants, their time is being used wisely, and they feel like they're engaged and they have value to add to the conversation. So those are 3 things that you can do to make sure that your board is as effective as it can possibly be. We need to make sure that they have expectations so they know what they're supposed to do, and we're not evaluating on our perception when they don't even know that that's an expectation. Are you communicating in a way that they will look at it, understand it, and that they view regularly? That it's a communication process that's easy for them to manage. If they're not a really good email person because they get 8,000 business emails because they're busy people, maybe we need to use a phone call or a text message or something to send them information that's important. And then finally, how are we engaging them? And we talked a little bit just about engaging them at a board meeting, but there are so many other ways that we can engage board members in the process. And we need to find ways to make sure that they are active and engaged, because an engaged board member is going to be so much more effective for your organization, which means they're going to be able to help you identify people who can help you raise more money, more volunteers, more ambassadors, more resources to help you serve the people who are in your community and achieve the mission and the vision that you have for your organization. So hopefully those are 3 tips that will be helpful in how you can have a more effective board. I would love to hear from you about what are some of the other things that you think can make a board more effective. Please feel free to share them in the comment section, because I think it's a good conversation. Boards have become more and more a critical discussion about how do we manage boards. And because people don't do a good job managing them and having them run effectively, it's becoming harder and harder to find people who want to serve on those boards. They know the time commitment. They know the financial, usually, expectation. And they are trying to decide, is this worth my time? Am I going to be able to be an effective board member for this organization? Is the organization going to engage me in a way that's going to allow me to provide the greatest return on the investment and the resources that I have? So think about that as you're putting together your board. Take a look at where you're at, and maybe there are ways you can change, but definitely make sure that you have clear expectations, that you're communicating with them effectively and efficiently, and that you're engaging them in a way that is meaningful and has purpose. With that, I hope you have a great rest of the day, and we will be back tomorrow with some more tips.